Hello there. Regular viewers here will know that I don't really cover modern media.
Is it sensible to go on?
Probably not.
Well, for once I'm going to make an exception.
Get used to it or go home.
The reason for this is that I watched an episode of a little-known TV show called Doctor Who and was blown away by just how much the tone reminded me of classic anthology TV like The Twilight Zone or Amazing Stories, or even a show I have previously covered, Erie, Indiana. Also, it's partly set and shot in Wales.
We are in Wales! Spectacular!
Based on Welsh folklore, so I have some personal interest.
I'm Welsh.
I also knew after watching it that the ambiguous nature of the story would cause much consternation amongst the audience, ignoring the usual wet blanket naysayers who complain about everything.
Daleks, Sontarans, Pteroleptils, Slovene.
But there are some criticisms I didn't expect.
What?
Now, on to spoilers, and the first thing I want to address. The complaints I don't agree with, but understand.
I don't understand!
Mainly that it's too ambiguous. It raises too many questions it doesn't answer. And while I can see why this will infuriate some people, particularly those invested in the lore of the show, I had no issues with this at all, as I like ambiguous storytelling. A lot of the anthology shows use it, and I don't need to have all the answers by the end of the story. But I get it. Some people do, and as I said, if you're particularly invested in the lore of the series, you want them to be feeding you more.
I always find that violent exercise makes me hungry.
Another complaint I've seen is that with the timeline being reset at the end, nothing that happened mattered. Especially as Ruby couldn't remember any of it.
What was the third time that you've been to Wales?
No, I don't know. When was it? I can't think.
Again, I can understand why people don't like this. It's not about character growth if the character doesn't remember it. And it means anything she did is now undone.
Well, that was pointless.
For me, I don't particularly care because it's not about the character growth. It's about delving into who the character is for the audience. It's about how she reacts in isolation, literal isolation in this case. The character may not have learned any more about herself, but we as audience members have.
Well, that's all right then.
The Roger ap Gwilym plot is not the point of the episode, as it doesn't resolve her situation. It is simply a dragon for her to slay to prove herself as the hero she needs to be.
To become the hero that she already thinks you are.
Some of the other criticisms I have an explanation for, whether that's satisfactory or not though, that's up to you. The first is how Welsh people are portrayed, apparently being too mean to Ruby from the start of the episode with no justification. And I think this misses the point, because for me what it's doing, as well as creating a fake spooky tone, is parodying a perception some English people have of Wales. There's a common urban myth that whenever an English tourist goes into a pub in Wales, the patrons immediately go from speaking in English to all speaking in Welsh. This is not true for many reasons, but it persists to show how unfriendly and unwelcoming Welsh people are to English tourists. The characters in these scenes are supposed to be caricatures of this mythic grumpy nation, while also commenting on the fact that we are not particularly suspicious or trapped in our mythic past, as people often believe.
People come from outside, they think we're all witches and druids.
The comment about all the castles being ways for the English to oppress the Welsh isn't even completely true.
Do you know why Wales has so many picturesque little castles? They were torture centres set up by the English to rule with fear.
Some were built by the French to oppress the Welsh, and some were built by the Welsh to oppress the Welsh. Another complaint was how flippantly the story dealt with the Marty subplot. And again, I think the purpose of this subplot is not to be flippant, but to show just how easy it is for someone in power to do this and get away with it, even under incredible scrutiny, and how people won't speak up, with Ruby choosing to allow it to happen for the greater good in her particular case, deciding that the end justifies the means. And while we might not like that she's not a hero in this moment, it tells us more about the sort of person she has become in the intervening years without the Doctor.
Oh, he is a monster.
A slightly smaller issue people had was that they wanted to know what the figure was saying to scare people away. And this one is easy to address. If you knew how it worked, it wouldn't work.
If I tell you what happens, it won't happen.
That's the point of magic, which is what it is. If you know how the magic trick works, it's not magic anymore. It's a trick.
It's a trick. Get an axe.
I haven't seen anyone complain that the fairy circle that kicks off the story isn't actually a fairy circle. That is specifically a ring of mushrooms that they used to believe was caused by fairies dancing there, and if you stepped into one, it would be not very good for you. This is not that. It's more like witchcraft, and had to be put there by someone, but who that was and why remains a mystery. And I don't mind never finding out. What I liked about the episode was how it took us on a roller coaster that seemed to be entirely supernatural in nature, but what that nature was is unclear, as we get what we think will be a mythic ghost story, only to be confronted with something else, a mystery which we think will be resolved at several different stages. First with Ruby's mother, who surely must be able to resist the lure of this anti-siren, but fails the test. Then Unit, with all their resources and defences, who also fail the test, allowing us to see a character who is terrified of being alone, learning to deal with being alone, and how she faces that challenge by finding a dragon to slay from the land of dragons.
I am a son of Wales.
We see what she gains from being on her own. The strength and cunning to defeat this psychotic politician, but also what she loses in her compassion for the Marty character.
I'm sorry it took so long, because I think I'll only get one chance.
I've also seen some people compare the Gwilym plot to the Dead Zone, and I think that's a reasonable comparison on a basic level, but the idea of stopping a corrupt politician with some sort of future knowledge is not restricted to just these two stories.
The missiles are flying. Hallelujah.
What interested me was the not so obvious connection to Alan Moore's Captain Britain story, which concerned the reality warping mutant Mad Jim Jaspers, who was also a British politician who rose to become Prime Minister. Whether Mad Jack was influenced by Mad Jim is not entirely clear, but Captain Britain does meet Captain Albion in that story, and Marvel UK, who printed the story, also printed the Doctor Who comics at the time, so it's perfectly possible that Davis had read those comics and absorbed some of those details. This episode is full of potential for speculation, as it does leave so much unanswered. But I think this is also its strength, as it should allow for plenty of discussion. Unfortunately, what this can also lead to is people disappointed when they don't get the concrete answers that they want.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled.
I feel like this is the perfect episode to be discussed and argued about ad nauseum.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Well, that's my first up-to-date review for some time. But don't worry, I won't be making a habit of it. Thank you. Goodbye.